Call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of October 6th. We'll note that all commissioners are present, and the first item of business is the order of business. Are there any changes to the order of business? Hearing none, would there be a motion to approve the order of business?
So moved.
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. The motion carries. The next item then is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss?
I'll move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. We'll go to the non-timetable agenda, and the first item there has to do with the 40th Street Water and Sewer Bid Awards, and Mr. Coley and Mr. Kubas, I see both your names on here. Who would like to start?
Mr. President, I can start. Mr. President, Commission, we did open bids last week on an abbreviated 40th Street project. That project included water and sewer improvements that would service the one remaining parcel in the North Industries subdivision that is currently not served. It would install the water mains along 40th and provide stub outs for future services to all the properties along 40th Street. We received 5 bids on the project. Very good bids in my estimation. The low bid was from BEK Consulting for $828,000. And staff has reviewed the bids. We've had KLJ review the math on all the bids. And we recommend awarding the project to BEK Consulting.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kubas. Mr. Coley, any comments from your part?
Mr. President, acceptance of this bid will allow us to get this project started and get the property owner water and sewer service. This will be subject to the Special Improvement Assessment District. So we do anticipate the cost of this project will be special assessed to the benefit of property owners. I believe that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Coley. Any comments or questions by commissioners? Is there a motion regarding this bid award?
Mr. President, I move to approve the water and sewer bid.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Item B is a restaurant on-sale liquor license application. Mr. Kessel?
Thank you, President Johnson. This is an application for, as you said, a restaurant on sale. This classification of liquor licenses is unlimited, so we can issue as many as we desire. The applicant specifically is for Wings of Minot, LLC. They'd be doing business as Buffalo Wild Wings here in Dickinson. They have submitted all of their paperwork and paid their fee. They have undergone the proper background check from the police department, and staff recommends approval of the on-sale license to Wings of Minot, LLC.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kessel. You've heard his introduction. Are there any comments or questions by commissioners? If not, is there a motion regarding this request?
I'll move we approve the license.
I'll second it.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Item C is a seasonal employee agreement with Stark County. Mr. Kessel is going to introduce this item.
Thank you again, President Johnson. This is a agreement for selected staff that work within the weed department of Stark County. Those staff currently as proposed anyways, would come to work for the city of Dickinson under this contract from November through March. They would be 2 of them. They would be full-time in nature. They would be working within any department that we see fit. It is in our intent to use them as our buildings and ground staff, and then in the Public Works Department, primarily within streets or solid waste. The contract amount is hourly, based on the individual salary. That hourly rate does include total compensation to the county. So that would be their wage and benefits included. The Stark County actually approached us with regard to this this arrangement. The 2 individuals that are particularly would become city staff during that time frame are not CDL. They do not have their certificate, their driver's license for heavy equipment, but they can nevertheless be utilized in our street department and in the buildings and grounds, as I mentioned. So we are recommending approval, and the 2015 budget amount, or the 2015 expenses are budgeted in the 2015 budget. So it'd be our recommendation to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Are there any comments or questions by commissioners? Why wouldn't you require them to get their CDLs?
We may, when they become city employees during that time frame. We actually extended the agreement from 1 year to 3 years so that we would receive a cost benefit if we do get their CDL or do have them apply for their CDLs. So it is our intention to do exactly that.
Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion then regarding this item?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote then. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll get to item D. This is the 2015 budget. This is the second reading of ordinance 1559. And Mr. Kessel, would you like to make some introductory comments?
There are some changes in the version from first reading. There's some revenue changes primarily that are included in this ordinance document as opposed to the first. Those ordinance revenue changes are related to liquor licenses. We, in the past, have had, at least the recent past, we have sold a new liquor license each of the last couple years. Your first reading had the additional sale of a license in the first reading. In this version, we do not. We just simply have the renewals of existing licenses. So there's a $96,000 revenue stream there. We have also changed the transfer from the half-cent sales tax and reduced that to right around $1 million. In the first reading, it was $2 million. And we replaced that with a transfer from the oil fund. We've increased that fund to a little over $3 million, and in the first version, it was $2 million. So those offset one another. And then the staffing remains the same as it was originally presented. I think there was 15 staff members that were included in that original budget. I did work the exercise that was requested in terms of prioritizing that staff and provided that to you. But this budget does contain all 15 members that were requested. We are at a balanced budget, including those 15 members and including the revenue streams as they've been outlined before you this morning, or this afternoon. I also did some updates to the library revenue streams. We have we had a much better idea of what the annual investments from Stark County, Billings County schools and such, so I simply updated to include those as well. So those are the primary changes from first reading to second reading, and I'd try to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Do you have any questions? I'll make a couple of comments. I did meet with Mr. Kessel, and together we arrived at these revenue changes and the increased transfer from the Oil Impact Fund to nearly $3.5 million. But since we last met, the Petroleum Council held their annual meeting here in Dickinson. KLJ delivered its report to the Interim Energy and Transportation Committee, and then that same report was presented at the Petroleum Council in an abbreviated fashion, I believe. But in a sense, what we heard at the annual meeting of the Petroleum Council was it seems like the experts have increased their projections or their impacts in the oil field. The Lynn Helms Group moved the number of jobs up from, I think, around 70,000 energy jobs all the way up to 130,000. They're now talking 2 million barrels per day. KLJ, in their report to the interim committee, said 2 million barrels per day. Also said that by 2019, Dickinson really should add another 9,500 living units. Well, whether you use 2 persons per living unit or 2.3 or 2 point whatever, it's a big number. And in round numbers, it's, roughly, they're saying we should prepare for another 20,000 people in about 4.5 years. Well, I don't know that we can do that, but one other thing, then Mr. Decker and I also met then with the Airport Authority, their engineers, Senator Hoeven led that meeting, but we listened to the projections on airport boardings, and if you remember, it wasn't that many years ago we were trying to get to 10,000 annual boardings. This year we're likely to be around 60,000, and KLJ again was projecting that we could go well over 100,000 if we had the facilities to accommodate them. So I came away from these meetings believing that we really have to prepare to be a community of 50,000 people in a relatively short period of time. And by relatively short, I mean, less than 10 years. Well, that's a lot of people because, we don't know for certain, but, we're somewhere probably between 25 and 30,000 people right now. So it would mean, we have to prepare for doubling. Well, our focus has been primarily on infrastructure, and I think rightfully so. But we also have to pay attention to the human infrastructure of the city. And after giving it quite a bit of consideration, I told Mr. Kessel I would be in favor of funding all 15 requested positions, because if the pundits are anywhere close to right and we're going to go to 50,000 people, say in less than a 10-year period, we're going to need the human infrastructure as well as the physical infrastructure to do this. So it was actually quite an interesting past 3 weeks.
President Johnson, could I add 2 more things?
Absolutely.
Just quick, the other item that we did change was building permit revenue. As you mentioned, we've been putting a lot of focus and dedication on creating infrastructure, and because most of that infrastructure will be available and usable by November, we think that 2015, and I think Community Development Corton can agree that we expect 2015 to be our largest year in terms of building permit revenue. So we did move that number as well with the discussion with yourself. And then the other caveat, of course, to all of this was, or I shouldn't say caveat, the other rule that you asked us to build this budget on was no new property taxes or no change in property taxes to our existing base. So I have information from last year that shows that we were we held the line on property taxes and actually showed a decrease, which was the highest actually of the 12 most populous cities in North Dakota. We had the largest decrease of the city portion of property taxes. This year, we should hold the line, and there shouldn't be a increase in property taxes attributed to this budget. Now, there's 3 other taxing entities, of course, that make up property taxes. We're only one. But passage of this budget should not increase property taxes for existing property owners in the community.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. I think the big thing is we're going from just under $1.5 million a year in transfer from oil impact funds into the general fund to nearly $3.5 million. So we will have almost as many dollars coming into the general fund from oil impact as we do property taxes. Property taxes will still maybe be $500,000 more. But, and in addition to that, there is be roughly $7 or $8 million of oil impact money that could get used to pay existing debt, principal and interest payments to service existing debt. So when you look at a biennium, we're talking maybe $21 million right off of the top of our oil impact funds to fund our general fund, all the additional positions and extra expenses we have there, and then start to service the debt that we've been accumulating during this year. So, well, this is also a budget hearing, so at this time I would declare the public hearing open, and anyone from the public that would like to comment on the 2015 budget, you may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. All right, there's no one from the public that wishes to comment, so we'll declare that public hearing closed. We'll certainly invite comments or questions from commissioners.
You know, the only comment I would make, I'm glad we're doing the 15, but it just seems to me we need to be looking a couple years ahead, which we've been doing a little bit, and I know that's difficult, but if the projections are even half right, we're going to need a lot more staff. So it seems to me we need to be looking a couple years out and figuring out a way to do that. But I think this budget is where it should be.
Well, I know the engineering staff and Mr. Kessel on the project side are out 4 or 5 years on projects right now. Probably not quite out that far on staffing. I do believe with this budget, and Chief Sivak, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are 4 additional positions for the fire department in here, actually 4.5, but 4 for firefighting, 2 that would be authorized right away the first of the year, and 2 during the second half of the year. But with the new safety building and with the existing fire hall, that would allow us to staff both buildings 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with a small initial response team. That initial response team, I don't believe would have any volunteers on it, or would it? Fire safety is getting to be a pretty big, growing part of our budget. And Mr. Sivak, maybe you can comment on this.
President Johnson, Commissioners, the additional staff will allow us to maintain a response crew of 2 from each location 24/7, especially through the evening and weekend and holiday times. That will include, that's a response team of 2 from each location. That includes full or volunteer involvement in both locations yet. Volunteer component is critical to ensure that we have a minimum of 2 at each location. Our staffing plan extending out to 2017 will show in 16, we'll ask for an additional 4. And in 17, we'll ask for an additional 4. My concern is we're not asking for too little too late. But the volunteer component is still active, very much a part of making sure that we can respond with at least 2 and a truck from each location.
Right. We're trying to get to the point, though, where we're not so reliant on volunteers for initial response. We're still reliant on volunteers to
Yep.
arrive at the fire, but they may not be there in the first
Yes, sir.
few minutes.
Without this additional staff, we would not be able to ask the volunteers to commit to what it would take to staff both locations. Both locations won't happen without these full-time positions.
And if the experts, the oil experts are right, and we do approach 50,000 people, we'll have at least another 1 or 2 substations, maybe one on the west side and one on the east side too.
Another 1, absolutely. Another 2 is very conceivable, depending on the growth. It's truly hard to believe. Yet it's all played out just that way so far.
Okay, well, thank you for commenting. Other comments by commissioners?
I guess one comment I would have, Mr. President, is from the standpoint of public safety, the hiring of the firefighters and the police officers that we're probably going to need down the road, we should be looking at ways, and we were up at the League of Cities meeting, Mr. Kessel and I, and there were so many new things and ideas that kind of gave us how we can attract these people to work for us and keep them in the city. And not only just building this infrastructure, we need to also look at some of the other improvements to the downtown and stuff like that, and just make it a vibrant community. And I know Mr. Kessel can elaborate a little bit on some of that stuff that we saw. And I mean, it's going to be, this budget's just going to keep growing, and I think we're going to, at one point, we're going to look at not only considerable fire, but more police and more city and water and more just public works in general. It's just, there are challenges, but it looks good.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. Mr. Kessel?
I just wanted to mention, in terms of Commissioner Jackson's comment, we do have a staffing plan that does go out 2 more years. We did make a prediction based upon the NDSU growth scenario, which is now surpassed by the KLJ growth scenario, and KLJ increases the population gain and makes it quicker. So we're going to have to go back and take a good hard look, but we do have a 3-year staffing plan to deal with the growth that we expected, and that growth was at 6.5% annually until 2020. And what we're hearing now is, as President Johnson has mentioned, is that growth actually is going to exceed 6.5% in that similar time frame. So we'll have to go back and revisit that. And then just another comment based on Commissioner Decker's response. I have spoke with the Cooper Whitman from the Chamber of Commerce about some of the things that we did here. There were some excellent speakers there. I know Attorney Coling attended as well, and it was well worth our time. And I have shared some of those ideas and thoughts already with other agencies that endeavor to do the same things that we do in terms of quality of life.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kessel. Any other comments on the 2015 budget? Would there be a motion then regarding ordinance number 1559?
A motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. We'll go to item E, the financial report. Mr. Kessel, any comments you'd like to make about it?
I guess, no, I don't have any general comments about the financial report. We continue to try to keep that up to date. As you know, we are a little bit short-staffed in that area, so we do our best to make sure that it is as accurate as possible. I would base my report on your questions and leave it at that. President Johnson, if I could make one comment. There was a resolution, and I apologize for being a little tardy for the meeting, regarding Manufacturing Day. I'm not sure if that was added to our agenda. On mine, it was listed as 4C.
I don't have it
Oh.
on the written one. Is it on the computer one?
Yeah, it is.
No. I'm a paper guy. I'm still following the paper. So, okay, well, let's drop the financial report for the moment and go to item C, then resolution recognizing Manufacturing Day. I shouldn't have messed up on that one. Who is presenting the resolution?
I think Galen Baker from Stark Development is here.
Mr. Baker, are you going to read the resolution to us and comment?
I do not have a copy of the exact resolution in front of me. Mr. Ketzel, thank you. Change that for me. Thank you all for being here. If I could take just a couple of extra minutes, I want to say in advance that this resolution asks for your support for designating Manufacturing Day, October 15th in Dickinson. Manufacturing, as you may know, is and has for decades been a stabilizing force and a driver of economic growth for Dickinson. We may now be the second fastest micropolitan area in the country, but I would argue that even before then we could have put up a good run for most successful micropolitan community in the country. Before the Great Recession, and even through the Great Recession as it was called, we were growing in population. Everyone earned a little more every year. Everyone's house was worth a little more every year. The people in Dickinson and Stark County were pretty happy with things. You know, we were keeping more of our youth. Things like that were all leaning our way. And manufacturing was a big part of why we were that successful. And that remains the case now. We continue to work to attract manufacturing at Stark Development Corporation. We believe that its diversification of the economy is very important to the future of the city, even if we are going to grow to 50,000 people. And of course, you know, the manufacturers here have to work hard to compete because we're in an environment where the cost of doing business has risen considerably since those times prior to the oil boom. And so our manufacturers work very hard to be competitive. So the resolution proclaiming October 15th, 2014 as Manufacturing Day in Dickinson. Whereas the city of Dickinson has a strong history as a community supporting manufacturing and the approximately 1,400 stable, sustained jobs that manufacturers provide. And whereas manufacturing is a cornerstone of innovation in our economy, and manufacturing firms fund most domestic corporate research and development, and the resulting innovations and productivity growth improve our standard of living. And whereas many opportunities exist for Dickinson area residents to utilize their skills and talents in manufacturing in order to improve their lives and those of their loved ones. And whereas manufacturing diversifies the local economy, thereby bringing sustainability to the community. And whereas manufacturing is a significant creator of new wealth by means of sales outside of our area and outside of our state. And whereas over 1,200 North Dakota companies provide excellent careers in manufacturing for some 44,000 people and are adding new jobs every day. Now therefore, we ask that you, Dennis Johnson, President of the Board of City Commissioners in the city, do proclaim October 15th as Manufacturing Day in Dickinson. Encourage all the citizens to consider the positive impact of modern manufacturing on their lives and its contribution to the success of Dickinson, Stark County, North Dakota, and the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Is there any objections by the commissioners to declaring that day Manufacturing Day? There's no objection, then I'll declare October 15th as Manufacturing Day in our city, and I'd be more than happy to sign the proclamation.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And when we get the official looking proclamation, I'll sign it. Or do you have the official one?
I think I have. If I may elaborate,
I'll pass that down.
I also wish to share with you my Baker's Dozen Reasons to Love Manufacturing.
Do them quickly.
May I?
Yes, you may, but we have a 5 o'clock timetable agenda. so
Very
be
well.
Quick.
Reasons to love manufacturing. Number one, it employs more than 12 million Americans. Number two, there are approximately 338,000 manufacturing establishments in the United States. Number three, some 98% of those manufacturing firms are small businesses. Number four, manufacturing employee earnings per week are in the top 10% of all jobs. Number five, there are about 334 job openings in manufacturing, including many here. And these jobs give people unique skills useful beyond the workplace and help build each individual's personal worth. Manufacturing, number six, manufacturing accounts for approximately 60% of all U.S. exports, and growth in manufacturing has played a big part in the balance of trade and improving that balance. Number seven, in 2013, U.S. manufacturers exported $1.59 trillion in goods, more than double the exports of 2003. And that new wealth is coming to this country from all over the world. Number eight, manufacturers conduct 68% of all research and development, including many local company R&D efforts. And those have led to unique and innovative products sold nationally and internationally. Number nine, North Dakota has over 44,000 manufacturing jobs. Number 10, Stark County has approximately 1,400 manufacturing jobs. Number 11, manufacturing nationwide spends approximately $200 billion each year for energy for their plants. That supports our other industry. And number 12, manufacturing accounts for 45% of foreign direct investment in U.S. firms from 2010 to 2012. Number 13, it's a baker's dozen. 35% of manufacturers say they would encourage their children to pursue a career in manufacturing. They know that manufacturing will provide a safe, steady, good-paying job for a lifetime.
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Baker. Thank you for being here. Okay, it is 5 o'clock. We'll go to the timetable agenda items. We're going to have a series of public hearings regarding 2014 development impact fee projects. Mr. Coley and Mr. Kubas will do the introductions. Are there any general comments that either one of you have to make before we get started?
Mr. President, Commission, I can make a general comment. Before you, we have four impact fee districts. The Special Assessment Commission had met on September 15th, and the information in your packet is the recommendations that were brought forth through that commission meeting on the 15th.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubas. Mr. Coley, perhaps you could explain the process here?
Mr. President, Commissioners, these projects are the last of the series of projects that we did as development impact fees. In this case, each of these cases, the developer puts the money up front for the infrastructure installation of the project. The developer of these individual subdivisions in these projects did all of the water and sewer installation and street installation. And then pursuant to our development impact fee program, the city agreed to provide development impact fee dollars in the form of special assessments to reimburse the developer for the installation of that infrastructure. In each of these cases, the developer owned more than 51% of the affected property. And so that was advertised and noticed to property owners of the impact that would be assessed to their property for the development of that infrastructure. On each of these cases, the initial resolution authorizing development impact fees was passed several years ago. And once this infrastructure was installed, then the city's Special Assessment Commission met to review the city's contribution to these projects and assess the benefit of properties as per their square footage or their linear foot toward the development of their roads and water and sewer infrastructure. I believe Mr. Kubis will go over the exact assessments that the Special Assessment Commission decided upon. You as a city commission have the final say on the assessment of the benefited properties. If you agree with those assessments, you can pass them as they are provided for or as they were approved by the Special Assessment Commission. You also have the ability as a commission to adjust the assessments as you deem fit pursuant to how you determine the benefit that each property received from the project as it was installed. Mr. President, unless there are any other questions, I believe that's all I have.
So the way we do this then is Mr. Kubis would introduce each one and, after he introduces the subdivision and the special assessment, and then I will declare a public hearing open and anyone can comment.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Kubis, the first one is the Fisher East Side Second subdivision. We'll let you get started.
The Fisher East Side Second project, like Mr. Colling had said, was approved as an impact district a couple of years ago. It had gotten built over the course of 2 years. The water and sewer was installed in 2012, and a portion of the streets were installed in 2013. If you remember back in 2013, this application for impact fees was brought forward to the commission in the amount of $900,000 approximately. The funds in that amount weren't available at the time. It was approved at an amount up to $600,000. And so the project was scaled back, and 15th Avenue and 16th Avenue were not paved. Water and sewer was installed in the entire subdivision. Those streets were left off. The total project cost, as we received invoices from the developer, was approximately $1.5 million. Of that, $548,000 were requested in impact fees for those benefiting properties other than properties owned by the developer. So the project was split out as we assessed benefit to the affected properties. On most of these, we lumped the water, the sewer, and the streets together because it was all installed. On this particular project, since water and sewer were installed as one project and only a portion of the streets were installed, we split those costs out and looked at each lot individually if they received water and sewer service and a street adjacent to their property. So the amount of the assessment is the amount of the impact fee request was $548,572.16. With that, I'd open it up to any questions that the commission may have for me.
So that's this, for the affected properties, we're spreading $548,572 then over them, the full amount?
That would be the full amount of the impact fees that were paid out to the developer and are being assessed now over the properties owned by parties other than the developer.
All right. Okay, at this time, we'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone that would like to comment regarding this resolution may do so now. Come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments.
Mr. President, City Commissioners, we're here representing Denny's Electric. Corey Holler is the owner. We did appear before the City Special Assessment Commission on September 15th, voicing our concerns the way special assessments allocated.
Excuse me, we know who you are, but you have to introduce yourself because we're...
My name is Skip Rapp, Corey Holler owner.
I'm Corey Holler.
As I said, we did appear before the Special Assessment Commission on September 15th to express our concerns the way special assessments were allocated to the property that Corey Holler owns. Basic concern was too when 16th Avenue was taken out and not paved. We had no problem with all special assessments if that would have been done at the time. You know, when this was first sent out and advertised, 16th and 15th were both included, you know, and they were removed at a later date. Taking a look at the benefit along Carroll Street on the north side of the property, it provides very little to any benefit at all to that property owned by Mr. Holler. 16th Avenue is the biggest benefit. Also too, when Carroll Street was built and stuff too, there was drainage that came off of the south side of that street across Carroll and actually basically went along the south side of the apartments, and that wasn't taken into consideration. So now there's probably 3 to 4 feet of water that's impounded on that property during times of heavy rain. That's going to have to be dealt with at some time. That was discussed with Mr. Kubas during that meeting also too, and they're aware of that issue. Mr. Colding stated and stuff too that, you know, they could have looked at linear foot or per square foot basis. At the commission meeting, we did present the idea of stuff too of looking at a linear foot along Carroll Street, and would have reduced our special assessment from basically $37,000 to down around $11,000. I guess our biggest concern is how is 16th going to be built in the future? You know, if that's assessed to the properties adjoining that, that's going to be split basically to 2 properties. Based on a per foot basis from Mr. Kubas and stuff too, Mr. Holler could be looking at an additional $150,000 just in his special assessments to build 16th. It's going to benefit a lot of properties to the north, to the west, and to the east to access the I-94 business loop. You know, so I guess with that, that's kind of what our biggest concern is. How is that going to move forward, and how is that going to get paid?
Mr. President?
Mr. Kubas.
The street that Mr. Rapp is referring to, like I had mentioned, was originally included in the developer's plan to construct this entire subdivision, all the infrastructure. Right now, the city is looking at doing that as a project in 2015. Right now, we are anticipating paying for that through a special assessment or a special improvement district. That'd be completely up to the commission to make that judgment. Originally, if 16th and 15th Avenues East would have been constructed with this project, those costs would have been spread across the entire subdivision and not to the adjacent property owners solely. So it does raise the question of who will benefit from 15th and 16th Avenues in the future. Again, that hasn't the project hasn't been bid. That district has not been created yet. All those things are completely up to the discretion of the commission, whether or not and how to assess the cost of 15th and 16th Avenue. But it was the intent originally of the city at the time and the developer at the time to pave those streets and spread those costs amongst the entire subdivision.
So I think what I'm hearing that their concern is that when the city does go ahead and do this, if we don't spread it across the entire subdivision, then 2 properties in that subdivision would bear the cost rather than.
I think that would be your concern.
That's correct. There's only 2 property owners along from basically mid-block to Carroll.
Right. If the city elected to do that in the future, it's spread along 2 properties rather than the entire subdivision if it would have been constructed at the same time.
Correct.
So if you're looking forward, I mean, we rely a lot on city staff to take some time and study these issues and then come forward with a recommendation. Do you have a sense of what you're likely to recommend in 2015 if you do this project?
Well, my initial thought would be to assess the district that was originally created and intended to bear that cost. An obstacle we might have when that assessment would come around is that it's a street paving only project that is protestable. We've had this discussion on our 40th Street project over the past few months. If you put this up as a protest period for a street-only assessment, it could get protested out if other parties that wouldn't see the benefit of 16th Avenue being paved would want to protest that out. We don't have the benefit here of a 51% developer ownership.
Because the water and sewer was paid, we did that a long time ago. I think we put that in like 4 years ago. Is that right? I think, Craig? I believe that was in, because I know that's, we paid for that a long time ago.
The water and sewer in 16th Avenue East was not a part of this project as it was installed in a prior project by the developer at the time, Denny's Electric.
Along with paving the street from mid-block south to the business loop.
And there was a portion of 16th Avenue that was paved as well. Approximately half of 16th Avenue would need to be paved with this future project.
Mr. Jackson?
You know, I think we all understand what you guys are saying. I don't know how we're going to be able to give you any more assurances tonight, other than to hear what the intent is. You know, that's on the public record, and that's the way we will proceed. But some of it's going to be out of our control.
No, we understand that too, and I guess, you know, the biggest thing too is we have, you know, city right of way now is basically not maintained and a muddy mess.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people use that road now, and it's a mud, dirt mess. It's not being, there's no gravel on it now, which I think should have been done a long time ago. So it's cracking into our yard, and Tom's from Temperite, we're sharing that cost of cleaning that road all the time. There's contractors back there that are just dragging it back and forth. And we're just trying to see the solution to it. I mean, we understand that. I understand the whole concept of impact fees and how they work, but it was just seemed like it was just a little bit. We bought all 3 lots along there, so now we're taking the biggest impact. When Carroll Street on the end, we gave no benefit to that unless 16th is done. To share some of that burden, I wish it was talked about earlier, so we wouldn't be at this, you know, this point. But.
Well, I think we'd all agree that if we could go back a couple, 3 years and do it differently, we probably all would. But I think for now, we have to proceed, and we'll probably have some things to talk about in the next few months.
Would the commission even entertain the thought of, you know, looking at a linear foot though off of Carroll instead of just including 16th on a per square foot basis?
If you do that, it shifts the cost to the other impacted
To the benefit
properties.
of the properties, correct?
Yeah.
Mr. President?
And I don't, you know, maybe you can comment on why you chose the method you did as opposed to the linear foot method.
The rationale behind it and the reasoning behind it was because of the varying size of lots here. And, you know, the lot that is being assessed out of the 3 that is owned by Denny's is a good-sized lot. I suppose it's an acre and a half. But it does have a short frontage along Carroll Street. If 16th would have been a part of the project as it was originally intended, that kind of balances out because it has a long frontage along 16th. But the reason we did the square foot method was because of the wide varying size of lots. We go from about 1 acre lots in part of this subdivision to an over 4 acre lot who may or may not have a long frontage or a short frontage. So it felt like a square foot basis, while not favorable to every property, is overall the fairest way of assessing these types of costs when there's varying sizes of lots.
Would it be dangerous to suggest that when we do the specials a year from now, or whenever that will be, that we look at even though the project was done in 2 parts, that we look at it as a whole and do the adjustments that make sense? Am I making sense?
Definitely.
In other words, treat it as though the whole thing was being done at one time.
Yeah, I think that would make some sense. I don't know from a standpoint of levying this assessment how that would work with treating it as a whole. It might need to be delayed then?
No, I'm suggesting we go ahead with what we have now, tonight.
And that would be my recommendation as well when we pave the remaining streets, is that we look at it as if it were a part of of the overall project.
He's just saying that there's risk that the others might be able to protest out of it. And then the commission, I think, has kind of a dilemma there to decide how to handle it. And one of the possibilities is to look at, a city contribution to that cost where you wouldn't special assess the entire cost, you'd just special assess a portion of it. And you quoted me in the letter you wrote, and I think I don't remember the exact discussion now, that was back in 2013 or something, but I think at that time I recommended that, the city pick up a portion of the cost, because as Mr. Jackson said, if we could do this one all over again, we'd probably do it a little differently, but.
The other thing that I think should be obvious to everybody is, let's do this early. Let's try to get this district going and get the protest hearing done just soon after the first of the year or something.
Anything else?
Nope. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
President.
thank you.
Commissioners.
Thanks for that.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to comment on the Fisheries Side Second subdivision properties? Not, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Mr. Colleen, I believe this is Resolution 55?
Mr. President, this will be Resolution 56.
56, okay. All right, any comments by commissioners?
Mr. President, I'll move that we approve Resolution 56, 2014.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to State 7th Edition. Mr. Kubas, would you introduce that?
Yes, the state 7th edition was a residential development, I believe done in 2012. Again, it's taken a couple years. The city formally accepted the infrastructure in 2013, so we're moving forward now in 14 with the assessment of those impact fees. This was a $300,000 impact fee, which is the maximum per our ordinance. We received no comments, no public comments during the Special Assessment Commission hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubas. At this time, we'll declare the public hearing open for the State 7th Edition. Anyone that would like to comment may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name. We'll hear your comments. Anyone from the public? There's no one from the public, so we'll declare the hearing closed. Any comments or questions by commissioners? Mr. Colleen, I assume now this is Resolution 57. We're just going in
Correct.
numerical order? Okay. Is there a motion regarding 57-2014?
Move to approve resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. So we go to the State 8th Edition. Mr. Kubas.
The state 8th edition, again, was a residential assessment district or impact fee district. There was some commercial property that was originally included in that district. The applicant chose to remove those, and we reassessed the amount that was granted. Originally, it was approved up to $300,000. That amount was reduced when the commercial properties were removed from the impact fee district, and that was reduced to $92,750. On this particular project, we did a per each assessment because, as it turns out, all the remaining residential lots in the subdivision were identical in size. Again, there were no public comments that were made during the Special Assessment Commission hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubas. So we'll declare the public hearing open for the state 8th edition special assessments. Anyone wishing to comment may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. All right, there's no one that wishes to comment, so we'll declare the hearing closed. Any comments by city commissioners? This is Resolution 58-2014. Is there a motion regarding it?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. So we'll go to the Diamond Acres subdivision. Mr. Kubas.
Mr. President, Commission, the Diamond Acres subdivision is the last project we had through the impact fee program. This project, again, a couple years old. It was all residential development here. We did receive some comments during the Assessment Commission hearing, not related to the assessments in particular, but related to some drainage concerns they had with some of the large rain events we had over the past year. Again, this one is going to be assessed per lot, as they're all fairly equally sized residential lots. And this impact fee was in the amount of $300,000.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kubas. So at this time, we'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone that wishes to comment regarding Diamond Acres may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. There's no one from the public that wishes to comment, so we'll declare the public hearing closed. This would be Resolution 59-2014. Any comments by commissioners?
I'll move we approve 59.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Okay, our 520 timetable items are some rezoning petitions, and Mr. Kurtan will have you introduce these.
Mr. President, Commissioners, the first item we have today is a rezoning petition for Westridge First replats of Lot 1 through 17 through 21 of Block 1. This is a rezoning petition from Ag to medium-density residential and high-density residential and park. The property is situated south of 15th Street West and north of Westridge Drive. The Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff recommend approval. Mr. President?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kurtan. Mr. Colling, is this 1563?
That's correct, Mr. President,
All right.
yes.
So at this time, we'll ask if there's anyone from the public that would like to comment regarding this proposed ordinance. If you'd like to comment, you may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. All right, there's no one from the public that wishes to comment. Any comments or questions by city commissioners? Would there be a motion regarding then the first reading for ordinance 1563?
I'll move to approve the first reading, 1663.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson? Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. The second item is Cook Meadow Hills, 5th edition. Mr. Kurtan?
This is a rezoning petition from agriculture to single-density residential, medium-density residential, and planned unit development. The property is approximately 83 acres. The Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff recommend approval contingent upon the 7 attached conditions of approval to be attached as part of the ordinance. With that, I'm available if you have any questions.
Do you have those conditions with you?
We modified those conditions. I made a note to Attorney Colling prior to it. I do have them. I could read them into the record if you prefer. I don't believe the applicant is here. They are aware of the conditions. They were contained within the staff report. We will have that for the second reading if you like. It's, Mr. President.
Are they very long? I mean,
It'd only take me a couple minutes to read through them.
why don't I would like you to read them.
Okay. Prior to final PUD approval, the comprehensive plan map amendment must be adopted by the City Commission from commercial to residential for a small portion of the PUD situated in the northeast corner, which is currently designated as commercial. The PUD approval shall expire 2 years from the date of the executed ordinance if no significant development has occurred on site as determined by the Community Development Director. This is pertaining specifically to the PUD portion of it. Most of the rezoning is only for, is normal. The PUD portion is for the apartments. It is a small portion of it, of the total. Prior to final PUD approval, the developer shall designate a second unobstructed road connecting the subdivision to the satisfaction of the fire chief and left waived by the fire chief. This is pertaining for second access into apartment units. We normally have that as a condition of approval. The PUD shall be limited to the total number of multifamily housing units not to exceed 260. The PUD approval shall be conceptual in nature and not to be interpreted as building permit approval. The development shall be required to be consistent with all applicable federal, state, and local regulations and the Dickinson Municipal Code. Prior to final plat approval, the developer shall install cluster mailboxes for all residents in central locations situated throughout the subdivision, and all locations shall be approved by USPS, and all mailbox easements shall be depicted on the plat to the satisfaction of the Community Development Director. The timing of installation shall be described in a development agreement. The development agreement will be forthcoming to the City Commission for final approval. Pipeline easement signs shall be installed along said easement at regular intervals, notifying the property owners of said easement. Sign language, material, color, and size shall be determined by the Community Development Director. There is a pipeline going through the development as it did for the prior Cook Meadow Hills, and this condition is there so that we can ensure that there will be signs for future development around it, so people are aware that there's a pipeline easement in the area. I want uniformity, so I attached a condition as part of the PUD. And with that, I can answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Catan. At this time, we'll declare a public hearing open. Anyone wishing to comment on this ordinance 1564 may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Anyone wish to comment? There's no one that wishes to comment. Are there any comments or questions by city commissioners? Not, would there be a motion regarding first reading of ordinance 1564?
Motion to approve, Mr. President.
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner.
Aye.
Mr. Jackson.
Aye.
Mr. Decker.
Aye.
Mr. Altman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We have a 5:30 item. This has to do with the Dickinson Municipal Court, alternate judge. Mr. Kessel, can you introduce this?
Thank you, President Johnson. The request before us was received from Judge Keough. He would like to see the appointment of Patrick Brook as an alternative municipal judge. We use alternative municipal judges when Judge Keough has a conflict of interest or scheduling conflicts of some kind. Mr. Brook has been working with his firm since 2012, after his graduation from the UND Law School. We currently have Danae Kautzman as an alternative judge. She is from Mandan, and so she has to travel here when court would be required. This would provide another alternative to us, and have someone who is local as well. And as you can see, Judge Keough is here to provide further comment.
Welcome.
President Johnson and Commissioners, it's alternate judge, not alternative. I hate to correct you, Mr. Kessel, but it's alternate judge. And some of you might recall that it's been very difficult to find a local attorney who would serve as an alternate judge, primarily because of conflicts and so on. And as was stated, Judge Kautzman from Mandan has been our alternate for about probably 5 years, and she fills in for my occasional conflict with my office and because of at the time matters. Patrick is seated right over here, and he's a local fellow. He's worked with me since March of this year. He's a 2012 graduate of UND, the law school, as well as Trinity High School, and his undergrad is from UND as well, and he has joined my practice. And I asked that he be appointed as an alternate judge to help out. We'll still need Judge Kautzman because we'll still have conflicts of interest that we have that will apply to him as well. And I plan to have him be available to start working into dealing with bond matters and occasionally a regular court day as time permits. But that's the request, is that he be appointed the alternate judge along with Judge Kautzman.
Okay, thank you, Judge Keel. Are there any comments or questions here by commissioners? If not, sounds like a reasonable request to me. Was there-
Mr. President, I would ask Patrick if he would just stand so you can get a better look at him. And so you'll, if you happen to ever come to court, you might see him there, you'll recognize him.
I'm sure the only reason we would be in court is to be a witness. I would hope. Okay. Any other comments here? Would there be a motion regarding this item?
I would make the motion to approve the request.
Second.
Okay, we have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Unanimous. There you go. You're welcome. Okay, we will go back to the non-timetable agenda. We had just started on the financial report, and I think Mr. Kessel was to the point where he was asking if you had any comments or questions. Mr. Kessel, I know we need to make some entries, moving monies from the oil impact fund and probably sales tax and maybe one or two other spots into the building funds because we're carrying quite a large negative there. When do you intend to make those entries?
I think it's safe to say, well, let me provide an update on the Deputy City Administrator position. Since that would be the person who we would hire to take care of those entries in the future. We have interviewed 4 different people. We had an initial pool of 18. We pared that down to 4. We have now done the initial interviews of those 4. It is the intention to pare that number down to 1 or 2 and then have a next round of interviews as early as next week. We hope that we can identify a candidate after that selection process and make an offer by the end of next week, assuming we can schedule the second round of interviews. I anticipate that once the offer is made, that we'll have somebody on staff sometime in November, probably the later half of the month rather than the earlier half of the month. So then we would have that person on board and learning, especially the financial side. So having said that, I work with Denise, specifically Denise Bresden, to make those transfers. We have not made a lot of those large ticket transfers based kind of waiting for the Deputy City Administrator / Finance Director. We can certainly work with her to make them in advance if that's the desire of the City Commission.
I don't see, I guess, maybe, I don't see why we can't do that, even if you had to, retain Mrs. Johnson for a few hours to help you make them if you're not quite certain how to make them. But, it's kind of misleading because we carry large cash balances in some areas and then negatives in others. And I know they, in total, pretty much balance out. But if someone is just looking at one line item and not the total, might scare them.
We'll take care of it before the next City Commission or the next financial report.
Yeah.
Let's go that way.
I think the the good news in the financial report is that our various sales tax collections remain strong. You know, I think you all saw that through August, our sales tax, our 1.5% sales tax is running nearly 16% ahead of last year. So that indicates again that we have a strong growing economy and likely a growing population with that. So is there anything else in terms of the financial report? Would there be a motion to approve the report?
So moved, Mr. President.
Is there a second? Second. We have the motion, the second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. So we'll move to public safety, and Chief Seebach has a proclamation here that he would like to introduce.
President Johnson, Commissioners, the week of October 5th through the 11th is Fire Prevention Week, nationally recognized as Fire Prevention Week 2014. And through proclamation, we would like you to recognize and proclaim Fire Prevention Week 2014 for the City of Dickinson. This year's theme is Working Smoke Alarms Save Lives, Test Yours Every Month. And in lieu of reading each whereas, if you wouldn't mind, I could just highlight the intent of the proclamation, or I could read the entire proclamation to your preference.
You have to read it for it to be official.
I was afraid of that. Okay. Whereas the City of Dickinson, North Dakota, is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting Dickinson, and whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire, and whereas home fires killed more than 2,700 people in the United States in 2013, according to the National Fire Protection Association, and fire departments in the United States responded to 369,500 home fires, and whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires in half, and whereas 3 out of 5 home fire deaths result from fires in properties without working smoke alarms, and whereas in 1/5 of all homes with smoke alarms, none were working, and whereas when smoke alarms should have operated but did not do so, it was usually because batteries were missing, disconnected, or dead, and whereas Dickinson residents should install smoke alarms in every sleeping room, outside each separate sleeping area, and on every level of the home, and whereas Dickinson residents should install smoke alarms and alert devices that meet the needs of people who are deaf or hard of hearing, and whereas Dickinson's residents who have planned and practiced a home fire escape plan are more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a fire, and whereas Dickinson's first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education, and whereas Dickinson residents are responsive to public education measures and are able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes, and whereas the 2014 Fire Prevention Week theme, Working Smoke Alarms Save Lives, Test Yours Every Month, effectively serves to remind us that we need working smoke alarms to give us the time to get out safely. Therefore, I, Dennis W. Johnson, President of the Dickinson City Commission, do hereby proclaim October 5 to 11, 2014 as Fire Prevention Week throughout this city. And I urge all the people of Dickinson to test their smoke alarms at least every month by pushing the test button and support the many public safety activities and efforts of Dickinson's Fire and Emergency Services during Fire Prevention Week 2014.
Thank you, Chief Seebach. It's an important topic. You presented it well and read it well. Are there any objections to me declaring this particular proclamation? There are no objections, so we will declare the week of October 5th through 11th as Fire Prevention Week throughout the city. I'm pleased to sign this.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to engineering. Mr. Kubus, do you have any project updates?
I just have a few, mostly related to some road closures and some changes in traffic signing that we're proposing and will be implementing here. We've started some of these implementations, but on a couple projects that have been ongoing most of the summer, 10th Avenue West, north of the Prairie Rose Elementary School, is nearing completion. Our hopes are that in the next month that'll be open to traffic. They have some landscaping, lighting installation, and seating to do on that project. Same with Empire Road. The concrete pavement and the sidewalks and the multi-use trail are all installed. They have some landscaping and lighting left to do, and the hopes is that that street will be open coinciding with the opening of the hospital. Everyone sees a lot of work on the West Business Loop, and sometimes it's really hard for even me to differentiate which project is ongoing. We have a couple development projects going on there, a city water project on the east side of the Business Loop, the city sewer project on the west side of the Business Loop. So it's very, very busy there. Most, if not all of that work, though, should remain off of the roadway. There are traffic control signs set up, but it's for a gravity sewer main and our 24-inch water main, the city projects that are going on in those right-of-ways. We continue work on Broadway, and that work was planned and probably will spill over into 2015. There's been intermittent road closures. There's road closures in place right now for a few blocks, and that work will probably last until freeze up. We hope to get all the streets patched up. The work that they've started, we want them to kind of button up before the winter. So that work is ongoing. And then everyone's favorite street closure on 15th Street West, on the north of the interstate, is again closed. It was closed last month for the force main installation. We're working on the gravity sewer portion of that right now. The closure went into effect today, and it's going to be closed, unfortunately, for the better part of this upcoming month. One thing we've planned with that closure is to look at addressing the three-way stop at State Avenue and 21st Street. To a lot of new drivers to the area, it's kind of an awkward three-way stop. What we're thinking about doing there is signing it as a four-way stop. I know there's been some issues with that in the past with icy conditions and vehicles sliding through that intersection, but with the increased traffic, we really backed up the traffic on 21st Street when that one leg of State Avenue is free-flowing. So we'll put advanced stop sign warning signs up for that new signal or that new stop sign. That's our intent right now. We are studying it. It'll probably be a signal by this time next year, but for now, we think that's a measure that we need to make. Some other stop signs that we did look at in the area of the Prairie Rose Elementary, some of them have been installed and some of them are still forthcoming, but our intent was to make four-way stops at the northwest and northeast corner of the school. There's a lot more traffic there, though 10th Avenue and 12th Avenue are through streets, so those will be signed as four-way stops. Try and get people to slow down in the area of Prairie Rose Elementary. With that, that's my updates on some of our construction projects. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Kubas. Any questions for the city engineer or comments? All right, we'll go to Public Works. Director Zuroff, do you have any project updates?
President Johnson, Commission, I was gone last week for a conference, so I don't have a lot, but I got a couple things I would like to update you on. Today we made an offer and it was accepted to our new chief for wastewater. So we'll have a chief wastewater at our water reclamation facility. So I'm excited to get somebody hired and get him on board in a couple weeks. Last Thursday we did a startup for the West Lift Station, and with that startup that concludes that whole loop of the water reclamation facility, Influent Pump Station, West Lift Station, and so all of that is online and ready to accept wastewater from the west. I think that's an important point, and I'm excited to deliver that news. Another thing that was I found out last week was the water reclamation facility has been selected as the North Dakota chapter of American Public Works Large Project of the Year. So I think the city should be congratulated on that, and there'll be an award presented at the APWA conference next, in about a week and a half. Other than that, that's all I have. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Zaroff. Any comments or questions? All right. Then we're to community development, and Mr. Curtin, you have several items here, so why don't we just let you introduce each one, and then we'll act on them.
Okay, Mr. President, the first item is the final plat for the Buffalo Bend subdivision. This is the final plat for the subdivision. It is generally located west of 10th Avenue East and south of 9th Street East. It is approximately 4.4 acres. The Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff recommend approval. Mr. President?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curtin and Mr. Colling. This is a resolution. If I've got my numbers straight, I think we're up to resolution 60.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Any comments or questions by commissioners? Would there be a motion regarding resolution 60-2014?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Mr. President, the next item is the development agreement for the Buffalo Bend subdivision. This is a very standard development agreement. City staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Mr. Catan. Does anybody have any comments or questions regarding this development agreement?
I'll move we approve the agreement.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Mr. President, the next item is a development agreement for Riverfront Estates. The development agreement is in front of the final plat for it. The applicant desires that the development agreement be approved prior to submitting their final plat to the City Commission. The project is located at 6th Avenue Southeast and Rivers Drive. There are 7 infrastructure-related conditions in the development agreement. City staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Mr. Catan. Are there any comments or questions regarding this agreement? Would there be a motion regarding the agreement then?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Next item, Mr. President, is citizen interest form. Natalie Pierce, who has a master's degree in urban regional planning and a planning background, is bringing forth her volunteerism to serve on the Planning Commission. This would fill the last vacancy that we have within the city limits. There still is 1 vacancy in the extraterritorial zone to be filled. We could go up to a maximum of 10 on the Planning Commission. City staff would recommend approval of Natalie Pierce's to be added to the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curtin. Any comments or questions here? Mr. Kessel?
I'd just like to add that she does have maybe Mr. Corton mentioned it, a master's degree in planning from UC Irvine. So she comes well qualified in the field.
I read through the application. Looks like it'd be a great addition to planning and zoning. So,
I could add, Mr. President, not as prestigious as Eastern Washington, but close second.
close second. That's a 2-year school, isn't it?
Vocational.
All it takes is 2 years.
No. Okay, so we represent different football teams up here. We got Eastern Washington, we got Montana State, we have North Dakota State, Minot State.
Ours win, though.
Yours win. Any rate, let's act on this. So Will there be a motion to approve the appointment of Ms. Pierce to the Planning and Zoning Commission?
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
We have the motion and second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries.
Mr. President, the last item is a zoning text amendment. This amendment is to increase the setbacks for garages for multifamily developments from the standard of 24 feet to 30. The reason for the increase is it is necessary when you have two structures and only 24 feet. It's very difficult with an average car, let alone a truck that we have predominantly throughout our community, to be able to make those proper turning movements. And what inevitably ends up happening is many of those central units become storage units instead of parking. And then the parking has to go off-street. City staff has been dealing with this for some time, and we're recommending the increase of 6 feet in order to accommodate those additional turning movements and to use the garages as garages instead of storage units, as unfortunately they're being used today. So we would recommend approval of that, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Okay, so this is ordinance 1565. Again, I may have lost track.
Correct, Mr. President.
1565,
1565.
okay. At this time, I invite anyone from the public that would like to comment regarding this proposed ordinance. You may come to the podium now, state your name, we'll hear your comments. Anybody wish to comment? There's no one from the public that would like to comment. Any comments or questions by commissioners?
I'll move we approve the first reading of 1565.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Before I go any further, I noticed laying here looked like a request for payment on the public safety building. It's not on the agenda. It wasn't added to the agenda. Were you expecting us to act on that? It's the application and certification for payment. This would be from J.E. Dunn. Oh, was it as a,
It's on the electronic agenda.
oh. Okay, I missed that. So we did that. Okay, are there any comments by commissioners, any issues by commissioners? Anyone from the public then wish to address the commission? If so, just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Anyone from the public? All right, Chair to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have the motion and the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We're adjourned.